All right, welcome back. This is Dr. Matthew J. Trom from Engineer Inc. This is the fourth video in my series on how to assemble, calibrate, and take data from the PASCO stress strain apparatus. We've now installed the rotary to linear actuator. We've installed the sensor that detects how many times I've turned this and turns that into a linear displacement. We've installed the lever here, which converts the displacement and the force on the sample, which will go here, into something that can be measured by the force sensor. We've installed the force sensor. We plugged everything into the data studio. To the PASCO 850 universal interface, and now we are ready to start taking some data. Now, the first thing that we have to do is calibrate this thing. The reason we have to calibrate it is even though the sample coupons themselves, here's one for example, are quite small. You can see if I turn this on its side, it's just as thick almost as a piece of foil, but anyway, they're quite small. So even though most of the force and displacement is concentrated onto the coupon, there is still going to be some bending in the apparatus, and we need to figure out what that bending is and subtract it away to get a correct stress strain curve for the sample coupons. And so the way that we do that is we introduce a very rigid component, which is this guy, called the calibration beam. The calibration beam is going to sit in here, and we're going to just calibrate how much the whole system deforms when the calibration beam is in place, and then use that information again to subtract away to determine the remaining force and displacement on the samples when we get that far. Okay, so in order to do this, I've got a couple of nuts on here. I don't think I'm going to need it, but just in case, I've got a 3/8 wrench, which will fit over the nuts and tighten them and loosen them if I need that. I don't think I will, because I'm going to try to keep everything finger tight, but just in case, it's there. So what I'm going to do then is pull these guys off. So just unscrew the nut on the displacement arm, and I'm just going to pull this off, everything in the same order, and sit it aside here out of view. There's a little spring on here which I'm also going to pull off and keep with me. So that exposes essentially a rod. If I turn this, you can see the rod is threaded, and then there's a point beneath the thread where it's just a cylindrical rod. There's an identical shape over here built into the lever. So we'll pull this nut off. Whoops, there we go, and keep all those pieces together, pull that spring off and pull that out of the way. Okay, so now I've exposed the two rods, and I did this before, so this will work out perfectly. If I put the calibration rod on, it should fit perfectly. You might be in a situation where, I'll turn this guy, maybe you try to put the rod on and the rod is too short, or maybe you try to put the rod on and the rod is too long. Either way, you'll have to adjust in most cases so that the rod fits on perfectly. And like I said, I cheated. I kind of did it in advance so I would have the perfect fit, but I'm going to put it on until it fits perfectly, and it should slide all the way down past the threaded part of the rod onto the unthreaded part of those two rods. And I'll turn it this way just so that you can see that. See right here, it's sitting on the unthreaded part of the rod. That's what we want. And we are not going to now put the nuts back onto it. The instructions specifically forbid doing that, even though I'm strongly inclined to do it. The instructions say not to, so we're just going to leave the rod completely exposed like that without putting any nuts on here. Okay, so now we are ready to open up Data Studio. Sorry, keep saying Data Studio. That's actually an important distinction. So PASCO discontinued the use of Data Studio, which was their data acquisition software they used for years, and they now use something called Capstone. So sorry, my inclination is always just to say PASCO Data Studio because it's always been that way, but it's now PASCO Capstone. So we are going to open up Capstone, and I'll show you guys at least how to set things up. And that should bring us to the end of this particular video. So we'll minimize this. I've got Capstone open in the background, but I want to show you what it looks like when you open it. So I'm going to double click here. I'm going to open up Capstone. I am just using a trial version of it, which is good for 60 days from the date that I put it on my computer. So I'm not going to buy or enter a key yet. I'm just going to hit close on this welcome screen. Notice at the moment that the PASCO Capstone screen is larger than the video capture screen, so I'm going to shrink it down until it fits. Bing. Boom. Bam. Done. Okay, cool. Now, the first thing that I want to do is make sure that I've got everything plugged in correctly. So I'm going to go over here to Hardware Setup. I'm going to click, and what I'm going to get is a little graphic view of my PASCO 850 Universal Interface. Notice up here that the software is looking for wireless devices connected via Bluetooth. I'm not using any such devices, so I'm going to turn this off so that the software stops looking for something that does not exist. Notice that I've got my force sensor plugged into Passport portal number 1, and I've got my rotary motion sensor plugged into number 2. So I just got to keep that in mind as I'm setting various parameters in my graph and table displays. But that's essentially all I wanted to see, is that those are plugged in and they've been recognized. So I'm going to close this up, and I'm going to go to this guy, which is graphs and digits. So what I want to see is an actual graph of the stress strain. In this case, it's going to be force displacement data. And then I also want to see the numbers, because I'm going to use the numbers quite a bit to sort of guide how far I go in my various displacements. So I'm going to open this up just by clicking on it. There we go. And the first thing that I've got to do is set what is the x-axis, what is the y-axis, and what these numbers are that are going to be reading up here in these text fields. So I want displacement on the x-axis. So I'm going to click measurement, and I'm going to go to the rotary motion sensor, and I'm going to look for position, right? That's displacement, so displacement in meters. And then I'm going to go here to the y-axis, and I'm going to click select measurement, and that's going to be force. Okay, cool. So now I've got position on the x-axis, force on the y-axis, and then up here I'm going to put position under select measurement. So there's my position, and right now it's not reading anything because I haven't started the experiment yet, but it's a displacement in meters, which is what I want. And then here I'm going to put select measurement, and I'm going to do force. And again, this should be reading 0 because I haven't yet started the experiment. So now I've got my PASCO Capstone all set up. I've got my X and my Y axis set. I've got my position and my force set, and I've reached the end of my 8 minutes for this video, so I'll wrap it here, give you guys a chance to catch up and set things up the way that I have done them, and check back in with me so that we can do the next step in just a few moments. Okay, see you soon. Thanks.